The heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand to win.
Brave kick.
It's been a terrible year for the Wallabies.
We're missing an injection of life.
Stupid guys think they're so good.
Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International, episode 252. I'm your host, Jero Sen, joined as always by Ben Kimber in the studio. Benny, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Better than I have been in past weeks after the weekend of rugby that was.
Yes, mate. There have been lots of chatter on our side in particular, but that is in the wake of an epic performance by the Wallabies after getting trashed in game one of the Bledisloe Cup Rugby Championship. But Ben, they came back with a vengeance, didn't quite get the chocolates at the time, and South Africa continued on their winning way. But we've got to give a quick shout out to a good mate of ours.
We do.
Ben, you got the latest news on the great Brett Papworth.
Yes, Brett Papworth, a fantastic mate of ours and a fantastic champion of rugby in Australia, suffered a heart attack Sunday night. The good news is, though, I saw a post by his son James, who I've met a couple of times, nice young bloke, who said that he's in good spirits and looking okay. So a big shout out to Pappy. We hope to see you back on your feet soon, mate, and we want to get you back in here and talking rugby.
All right. Well said, Ben. Pappy, hang in there, mate. I sent him a text message off before, and hopefully when he gets back on his feet, he'll get back to me. But we're wishing Pappy all the best. And of course, club rugby, he would have been so proud of it at the weekend, and we'll get in that in a moment well at North Sydney Oval. But as we've been saying the last couple of weeks, our show now brought to you by, at the top and back end of the show, by the Rugby Championship, the Rugby Pass Fantasy League. And Ben, I brought that up again. And Benny, somehow I think it's rigged because they're telling me...
Come and get me, boys. Come and get me. Number one, baby.
Let's have a look at your...
Slip from number 2 up to number 1.
Do you lucky... I put absolutely no time into it, but but there you go, mate. Well done.
Yes, mate. A couple of lucky ones in there, and I think
just because this is my first league I've ever done, because they obviously can do it in all sorts of sports. But how do you get your points?
Oh, mate, there's many different ways. The list's on there, but there's tries, tackles, passes, scrum wins. There's a whole raft of ways. We'll get into it a bit later in the show, I reckon.
All right, there he is. So well done, Ben, and thanks to Rugby Pass, the guys who are sponsoring our show through the Rugby Championship. Thank you very much. All right, so it has been a wonderful weekend of rugby. The Rugby Championship Week 2. The All Blacks, though, have retained the Bledisloe Cup. Ben Kimber, what is your strike issue of the week?
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Now, I had a few comments after the issue of the week last week where we called and said that Michael Cheika was done. A few people said I went off the top rope a bit too much. We've got to get into that today. What I want the issue of the week to be, though...
Someone wanted you to go off like Alex Jones.
That's right, Alex Jones from InfoWars. But this week, the issue of the week has got to be, are the Wallabies back? Is Cheika safe? After that game, which went down to the wire unexpectedly, did not see that coming, but the Wallabies bounced back. What does it mean? Are they back for good? We've got to wait and see. But first up, we have to say thank you to the All Blacks. Thank you to the Wallabies. A cracking game of rugby. It's been too one-sided too often, particularly in Bledisloe 1. Bledisloe 2 went down to the wire, 35-29, and if you weren't on the edge of the seat, you don't love your rugby because that was a great game.
Yes, it was an epic test match. I don't know if it's one of the greatest of all times, but gee, it was a pulsating one. It was a thriller, and you got to say that I thought the All Blacks weren't at their best on the night. I found them strangely off, Ben, and I know obviously Australia had something to do with that, but there was something else happening with New Zealand. They weren't quite right on the night, but I think Australia did well because they took advantage of their opportunities early, went to that lead, and their defence, they tackled like we thought they would, and there was definitely a change in the way that they defended. I said on the show last week, blokes need to aim up if they're in the position. And for the most part, those guys in their position defended in their position.
And look, you've got to give a rap to Nathan Gray, who said he could fix things quickly. The team did fix things quickly. Though, defensively, they did seem to go away from the structures that they were trying previously. We saw all this kind of swapping and moving around. We talked about Laurie Fisher saying what is going on in the D. In this game, the Wallabies' defence stuck firm, and they seemed to play in their channel a lot more. Beale and Foley defended in the front line a lot more, and they kept it intact and they kept it together, and they shifted well together largely. A couple of issues for them still. The question, though, for me, that I've been getting from people is, am I going to take a step back from saying Cheika's got to go? I actually am not. One game does not change what happens. We didn't make that call last week just because of Bledisloe won. We've been talking for a year about the lack of tactics, the attitude that's coming out of this Wallabies camp, and what they need. Cheika is a fire and brimstone coach, and we always say he can rev teams up. He got this team revved up. They would have been embarrassed. He got them revved up and out there. If they played with that ticker every week, we wouldn't be calling for change. But if they don't keep it up, then they have to change. Because right now, what Cheika can do is he can rev them up for one game, but Fiji, Italy, Scotland, where were they then? They got to keep bringing it if they want to stay in the game.
And don't forget all the test matches last year, all 8 of them. So you're pretty right there, Ben, because I thought if you were ever going to get up as a Wallaby player in the wake of the criticism, and they reckon they didn't pay attention to it, I'm going to talk about that at the moment because there's a very disturbing trend coming out of that Wallaby side at the moment, and it comes from the top. But if you wouldn't get up for that game, you would never get up. You're right about, and I've spoken to other guys like Greg Growden and people who've been out around the traps for a while, that this Australian side will get up for a game and it relieves the pressure for a while and they just play like rubbish for months on end. What we need to see is a back it up. If they don't back it up against South Africa, there's absolutely no chance of redemption for Cheika's Wallabies, and I stay firm with what we agreed on last week when you led the charge that we need change at the top.
Yeah, and Cheika has at least started to earn his way back. We've said before, we don't think he's a bad guy. We just don't think that he's got the right attitude for the Wallabies to be an ongoing force. He doesn't have an attitude to me that's going to build a dynasty. He has an attitude that is going to get you the odd fire and brimstone victory. He has a team which you can see it still after that game. It was the ref's fault. We got done in Auckland last year. We got done again this year by the ref. We should have won that game. I have no problem with him saying we should win the game and we want to win the game and we deserve to win the game. But I tell you what, this constant it's somebody else's fault stuff, or also the comments around those throwing eggs at us. Look, if you're going to keep losing badly, playing poorly, you're going to get eggs thrown at you. You play like that and you keep it up and you probably stop whinging too much and you won't get eggs thrown at you. But right now, he's got a long way to earn back to make sure that he's the Wallabies coach that can lead us to the World Cup.
Yeah, all right, so can we agree on, what do we agree on? New Zealand were robbed of 2 tries or 3?
Look, on the ref, I don't think Nigel Owen had his finest game. Okay.
Yeah, but just wait for a second. I just want to make a point on what Cheika is. But can we agree on how many tries we thought New Zealand legitimately scored?
Well, look, the point I was going to make was I think poor decisions went both ways.
Yeah.
And I think both Ben Smith's try and Brodie Retallick's try that were disallowed.
I thought
they were tries.
Okay.
I thought they were tries.
So New Zealand lost at least 2 tries.
Yeah.
Put the shoe on the other foot.
thought they were
what if
legitimate
Steve
5-pointers.
Hansen walked out there and said, "Oh yeah, we won, but we should have won by a lot more. We would desire 2 tries, maybe possibly 3. What a disgrace!" Did we hear any of that? No. Nothing. In fact, he praised Australia for their performance. It was a really measured press conference, but it's the typical class you see from Hansen post game.
Well, look, I think it's much easier to be classy when you're winning all the time, right? Hansen can get narky at times when the pressure's on, but he generally does a better job of controlling it and paying credit where it's due. He's done that very well, particularly when they've been beaten in the last year or so. But for Cheika's team, where is the congratulations to the All Blacks, thanks for a great test? Where's the basic, just polite response to having put on a show? Clearly hurting too much from getting embarrassed the week before.
All right, yeah. So the other thing is, some people are split about the reaction of Cheika in the box. So every cutaway of the box has Cheika blowing up, swearing, carrying on about decisions, and it's like throwing the toys out of the cot sort of scenario. So some people think it's great; it shows passion for the game. He's behind the team, but I've always been one that the coach needs to show no panic in the box. He needs to know it's under control, because when you do that, it sends a message to your players, because they watch the games afterwards when they do the review, so they see all that sort of stuff. And yeah, sure, you look like you're doing the right thing by the team because you're blowing up. But if you look in the Hansen All Blacks coach's box, it's all very cool, calm and calculated. They're writing down notes. They know exactly what they're doing and they're planning for the next move. But in the Australian box, it's throwing. I won't throw this around. It's a $1,000 phone. But it's all this sort of throwing stuff around or going crazy that does nothing for the team. Yeah. And you need to bottle that up, do it in the dressing room later on, when there's no cameras looking
Yeah.
at it, but it doesn't set a good
you know
vibe for the team.
Do you know what's most annoying about it? And I feel it too. Every time they cut to the coach's box and the toys are thrown around, we've talked before about they cut to the All Blacks coach's box and there's Hansen with Foster and Smith, two cool, calm heads planning and talking about what's going on. And every time they cut to Cheika, he's usually by himself, arms flying, or he's got his manager next to him. He's not a rugby guy. He's a former journo, so he's not a coach, but he's the only bloke you can usually see alongside him, and he's blowing up. But the disappointing thing is, we saw the Wallabies turn up. We saw them had ticker. They almost pulled off the most, one of the most stunning victories of a Wallabies side in memory for many kids. So, and instead, we still get this angst and anger out the other side. Now, it's okay to be upset you didn't win the game. It's okay to be upset to think you could have almost got there and you could taste it. But it's not okay to just turn it into a whinge fest.
So
let's talk about the game, eh?
Let's
I think there's enough on Cheika.
There's this stuff to come out of the game, the attitude. So do you want to cover that later on or while we're doing it?
Get into it, whatever you reckon.
All right, let's just knock it off while we can. So he did make a comment that the people have been bagging us or giving it a hard time.
Guilty.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other people, Michael Liner included, who never bags anyone. Yeah. Laurie Fisher, everyone else in Australian rugby, because you got thrashed the week before and because you had a diabolical year last year.
They were embarrassing the week before.
So that's why, because they expect a higher standard from the Australian team. So if you get offended by that in that position and whinge about it, I can just see it. If they won the game, they would have come home and said, yeah, we told you so. Yeah. Come on. You've had a lot of failure before you've had success. And the point has been, they have not had success. They have lost the Bledisloe Cup for another year. It's gone. So that attitude's one thing. Sean McMahon, Cheika talks about him after the game. He says, I'm going to do everything possible to try and keep him from going to Japan. Well, it's too late. We said he should have been picking him in the back row long before last weekend. And in the end, he's gone for a couple of years after he had most of the promise in the back row for a young and upcoming player. Now Sean McMahon says that I won't read the quote because he uses a swear word, but basically they didn't pay attention to anything outside the group this week. The whole of Australia was...
Basically told people to get stuffed.
Yeah, basically if you were critical of the team, he on behalf of the team said, get stuffed, we don't care about you, right? That attitude has got to stop in the Australian team. They've got to own up to the fact that they were worthy of criticism for their performance. They should be men playing rugby, not whinging like children.
Let's talk about the rugby.
All right, okay. To the rugby.
To the game. So, what a great game. Like I said, not one of the all-time classics, but for the very nature of it, it's the kind of game that I love and I always talk about. I don't want to win games by 40 points. I want to see my team win in the last minute. Unfortunately, it went down to the last minute here. It wasn't the Wallabies that won, it was the All Blacks. But again, congratulations to the Wallabies for turning it around, going over to NZ, where it's proven even harder for the Wallabies over the years, turning up there and almost stealing that game away. A couple of key things there. Over the space of about 45 minutes, it was 45-0 when you look at the two games. In this game in particular, the Wallabies scored 5 tries, and a guy I follow on Twitter, Rugby Reg, said the last time they scored 5 tries was in 2000, where they knocked over the All Blacks. So there was some excellent work there from the Wallabies to get to where they were. Did they clearly deserve to win that game? Absolutely not. The All Blacks dominated a lot of statistics, and the Wallabies did so well to counterpunch. But what did they do? They remembered how to defend. They defended in their own channels, Beale in the front line. They remembered how they could work together as a side. They actually brought some tactics to the game. We saw some high kicks and some crossfield kicks trying to pick out the shorter guys, McKenzie in particular. So they brought some tactics. They slowed the game down at times. Things that we've been saying this Wallabies team hasn't been doing in just trying to hammer out their own game plan. We saw them change it up a bit and get in the game with the right headspace. So we saw a game also, though, where the All Blacks looked a bit rattled. Sonny Bill Williams had one of the worst games I've ever seen him play in any code of football, with dropping about 4 pills in a row. But, to the last week's game where we said, is this because the All Blacks played so well or the Wallabies played so bad? You could similarly say here, the Wallabies taking on the All Blacks, was it because the All Blacks were off? Perhaps a little bit, but you've got to give credit to the Wallabies, who were in their face, playing it well, pushing the defence at the right time, and blokes like Beale who stood up.
It's never one thing. There's obviously got to be a bit of give and take from both sides, but there are some damning things about the Australian play which actually makes their effort even more astounding, and that is the scrum was absolutely demolished. Yeah. I've not seen a scrum demolished like that for a long time. Maybe in England a couple of years back when Eddie Jones was coach in Australia. Remember, Australia's scrum was absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
And Matt Dunning was injured actually over in the UK. So
And it
absolutely
was Sheridan, I think,
Yeah.
that massive prop they had, Sheridan, who took us apart.
Yeah, so that was one thing, Ben. The other thing was the kick-off receipt. Diabolical. They just couldn't take it. The All Blacks could basically kick off and almost be guaranteed of getting the ball. And that was one example at the end when obviously Kieran Reid came through. So there were a couple of big things. The other things that were in their favour was Will Genia finally having a decent game and doing what he does best, playing what's in front of him. So some of the All Blacks, particularly around the ruck,
Mixing it up, right?
yeah, weren't defending well. So Severe at the ruck, around the back of the scrum, or when he was needed, wasn't switched on enough.
Yep.
So his defence wasn't that great, and that let Genia through, and that was good to see. So things that Australian rugby is renowned for, they actually did. But Ben, is it for one night only, or is it going to continue? That's the big question.
There's another point there in the All Blacks camp in terms of an excellent win for them. They lost Kane and they lost Crotty, and Crotty's very talismanic for them lately. He's been the player who really sets that midfield and controls them so well. So the way that they responded to those losses to still get back and win it is a big plus in their corner. To what the Wallabies did against them. At least we're back to talking about what have been the traditional issues in this side, right? The scrum, kicking, Foley's kicking, either out of the hand or 4 goals, not good enough. Yeah. And, would you say it's cost you the game? But that would be unfair. That would be unfair to say it's cost the game. But tell you what, you want a bloke who's going to knock them over in international rugby. And the things.
Can I just say, the game changes when you miss the kicks.
It does.
It does. It's not like... okay, if they had those points, the All Blacks would have approached it differently. It's not exactly the same. I don't think you can blame Foley for the loss because Australia had the lead. They had the lead in the last few minutes, so they just had to defend.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the players.
Yep.
I'll talk about the All Blacks first. And the reason I'm doing well in the fantasy is because a few of the guys that I've backed as being serious class are showing it. Ioane I've talked about, and he is serious class. I've said it before, I'll say it again. 10-year player. Looks fantastic.
Oh, he was brilliant.
Had a brilliant game and will continue to destroy the Rugby Championship. I thought, I talked last week after the Bledisloe one saying that I didn't think Hansen's selections got tested enough. I still think it was a poor call to put Mackenzie at fullback. When you have the world's best fullback, head and shoulders the world's best fullback in Ben Smith, sticking him on the wing is a waste, particularly to bring Mackenzie in when you've got other guys in the wings like Milner Scudder that you could bring in. So I don't think that was a great selection call.
Yeah, Mackenzie didn't have a great first half. I thought he was much better in the second half, but so was the rest of the team. Like the first half...
Barrett had a pretty ordinary first half.
They were all... And I didn't think Aaron Smith was that great in the first half too. I thought he was very slow to respond to their dominance in the scrum. You've got to be really switched on to the back there when you're moving forward, because if you look around and carry on a bit, then you're going to miss the ball bobbling out. And that happened a couple of times. Australia got the advantage when they shouldn't have got the advantage out of sloppy scrums.
Yes, look, Smith had a very mixed game. You'd have to give that to Genia. And to see Genia play like he did back in 2011, actually taking on the line and mixing it up, and that changes things too.
Yeah.
If there's a threat there, it gives opportunities elsewhere. But the All Blacks scrum right on top of us the whole time. And I just want to call out a couple of Wallaby players. Kurtley Beale, what a great game. Took Sonny Williams apart, right in his face. And Rory Arnold, who for me, you could almost have given man of the match if you're talking about context, got dropped for God knows reason. Cheika's selection still mystify me. Why Stephen Moore started, why Arnold got dropped. Arnold comes back in, great physical game, particularly in the absence of Coleman, smashing away in there.
It's a tough head did well when he came on as well.
And you know who was absolute gold for Australia? Dane Haylett-Petty. His positional and defensive play, his smarts around the park, made a massive difference to the Wallabies.
Yeah. And Israel Folau had a much better game as well. Obviously, I think his confidence was boosted by getting that intercept try in the first half. But, Mackenzie really was, I didn't think he had to pass that ball. He was almost like it was robotic. He got suckered into it. So, and that's experience, I think, at the top level. But will he get another chance? That's a question that only Steve Hansen can answer.
Yeah.
So, but I thought the All Blacks were strangely off, even given the way the Australians defended, and they defended really, really well. Some brutal hits by the Australians.
Yeah.
And whether or not the Australians can do that again is the question. But I thought New Zealand just sort of lost their way a bit. But geez, once they got going, I thought their last try was their best play of the night.
Yeah.
That's how the All Blacks play.
Except I thought Kieran Reid knocked on off the kickoff, right? As I said, I'm not going to call that out as entirely game changing.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Because I saw decisions go both ways, and I thought Owen had a poor game, but on both sides, I thought he made some ordinary
unless
calls.
you're going to,
but I did think Reid knocked that on.
If you go back and deny the, if you're going to deny them there, then you've got to give them the tries.
That's my point.
On.
That's my point I'm making. Right? It wasn't completely formative.
Can I say on the Retallick put down when Owen's Nigel Owen said that that was a try, and then went upstairs and it was disallowed. The TMO didn't say it wasn't a try.
No.
He couldn't say.
Give me a reason, didn't he?
That was a try for how many years has we been playing rugby? That's a try every day of the week.
I agree that was a try. The other thing I agree, though, and I agree with Michael Cheika on this one, I thought Retallick dumped Hannigan on his head. He had an arm through the legs. He pushed him over. He wasn't getting up. I thought that was foul play, and I thought that should have been penalised.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it was a clear enough shot. We needed a clearer
I thought
shot.
it was pretty clear.
And he was getting up. So, yeah, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. But the shot on Hooper was clear. And it was just interesting how the referee decided that in the passage of the try that it was fair game and no further sanction took place. So I think he sort of makes it up as he goes along, you know. Yeah. It makes for a great contest, but you can't bank on that every week. This is what I mean about the black and white areas of rugby. Yeah. Yes, it was a nice game, but he's a bit loose with it. And unfortunately, you can't have that every time. Sometimes you want certainty. And I think the All Blacks can be absolutely dirty that they weren't awarded a couple of tries. Yep.
Yeah, well, look, if you thought Nigel Owen didn't have a great game, just thank your lucky stars you didn't have Gauzier, who did the Argentina box game. I thought he had a stinker. Yeah.
No, I thought he had a good game, but it's just the way that he had the game.
Okay.
So, okay. Right.
Can I just do a quick checker watch before we roll into the box game?
Yeah, we're halfway through the show.
Sweet. Lawrence Hooper, one of our regular commenters. Thank you, Lawrence. He posted onto our RuggaMatrix Facebook page. So go to visitors posts and you'll see the post there from Lawrence a couple of days back. But he shared a post about a podcast out of Ireland called The Hard Yards, where former Leinster back rower Kevin McLaughlin talked about pre-season training under coaches he's played for. And what he said wasn't really fantastic about Cheika. He talked about Cheika and said, you know, when Cheika came in, it was all clearly about, here it is. He said Cheika arrived with a mandate to toughen us up. He said he threw all the science out the window and he just goes, we're going to train harder than we've ever trained before. And he described the regime that sounded like some of that pre-Bledisloe Cup camp that the Wallabies did, you know, taping blokes up, beasting. And he said it was all him, i.e. Cheika, watching to see who buckled and who looked weak and who was kind of hanging in there. And then he contrasted that to Joe Schmidt, who said Joe used to do short, intense drills, rugby-related drills for conditioning, and then allow the strength and conditioning coaches to do their job. So it goes to show that mindset of Cheika that, you know, he wants to be that fire and brimstone figure in the team. I'm going to work you harder than you've ever worked before. We're going to sweat you to death. And then, but that's a player there saying that it was to the detriment of them. Well, he didn't say those words exactly, what I'm reading into it, to the detriment of them as a team in terms of their rugby approach and skills, because it was all about Cheika's dominance in flogging them more than it was about them preparing for a rugby game.
Yeah. And it was interesting heading into that match.
So thank you, Lawrence.
Yeah. Is that a bit of a Cheika watch?
That was Cheika watch.
Sorry, I should have been paying attention to it. But because he did go into the test match saying he received hate mail.
Yeah.
And I wanted to address that because I've worked with coaches who've received legitimate hate mail. So my point to you, Ben, is that I just found it really weird that he decided just to bring out, I've had hate mail. Now, hate mail, to some people, is just criticism to others.
I used to get it when I was a journalist at the Sydney Herald.
Yeah.
You get these long letters telling you what an idiot you were.
Yeah. So
sometimes they were right.
The hate mail I'm thinking is like, you know, they get the letters cut out and they paste it on there, serial killer wise. Yeah. That's what you're thinking. So, and a lot of people said, oh, that's just too far, it's crossed the line. And yeah, hate mail can be like that, but it all depends. We're relying on him telling us what hate mail is. Yeah. So they could be pretty, given the fact his reaction to Michael Lino was pretty severe, it could have been anything like, I don't think you're a good coach, there's hate mail. So anyway, I just thought I thought it was strange that it was brought up.
Yeah. Mate, I'll just throw in a couple of throw forwards here.
Yep.
Look, clearly, I think Tatafa Polito now's got to start for the Wallabies.
Yes, definitely.
McMahon, you've got to find him, keep him in there. He had a very good game, Sean McMahon. Be interesting to see how they play out that second row, but you wouldn't expect a lot of change for the Wallabies after that game. Kurandrani had a good game, but both Kurandrani and Beale still, those All Blacks tries, and particularly in the second half, they came out of their line. They came out and they didn't keep their line intact, and they created that space that the All Blacks exploited, and you cannot give them that start. On the All Blacks, Sam Cane's going to be a big loss if he's not available. I think, Artie Sevilla I've been a big fan of, but that physical presence at the ruck might be missed. Whether they might look to Todd or someone else to come in.
He just wasn't sharp enough. He wasn't sharp enough with Guinea.
Yeah. And so the All Blacks weren't quite as cohesive as you would have thought, and the kind of stuff that I thought might be possible against them after the Line Series, that's what we saw from the Wallabies.
But that's one game. You look at what the Wallabies did, an improvement in 1 week. Imagine what the All Blacks can do. There's a fair bit they can fine tune out of that, and I reckon they'll be. I wouldn't like to be facing the All Blacks next up, because they will be giving it to Argentina.
Let's roll then into the other game in the Bledisloe. In the Rugby Championship.
Can we play someone else in the Bledisloe? We might win it. South Africa and
Salta,
Argentina.
over in Salta, Argentina.
Salta, beautiful spot.
The box in the red jersey, my friend. I didn't enjoy it. Didn't like it.
So
Said I didn't like it beforehand. Don't want to see it again.
But what's the reason for it?
It's 25 years of rugby unity. Yeah. And I think that what they say is that the red in the jersey, they have red in their colours, right? And they don't utilise the red.
It was for a good reason.
It's a subtle red. It was a good reason.
Yeah.
That reason possibly is commercialisation of the jersey. They can sell some more.
Yeah.
But no, it is a nice concept, but the red just looked weird and I didn't like it.
Yeah. Because it was all red, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everything was red.
Yeah.
Didn't like it.
But in that game, I think 41-23 to the Box. The Argentinians look in trouble. I thought the Box were good. They weren't great, but they were more than a match for Argentina. And Argentina just don't seem to have the cohesion this year they've shown in previous years. The last couple of years we've seen them pick up the game with their offloading game and play a fast game at times and then slow it down and really pull it together. This Argentina team looks a little bit more in disarray. They weren't helped, as I said, by I thought a poor refereeing performance. They got a first yellow card I thought was very tough. They let themselves down a bit. There was a couple of stinks in there. Yeah. But this Argentinian team doesn't look in good shape. I think the All Blacks will tear them apart. And whether that's great preparation for the All Blacks heading for the Box, I don't know. So I think they'd prefer to have someone a little bit more in shape than Argentina before they go for the Box. In the game in particular, one of the keynotes for me was Etzebeth. I said at the start of the championship it should have been Kolisi, who was the captain. I thought he was the man that should be there because I thought Etzebeth has, been, red rag to a bull too much. He's a bit of a nutbag at times, a bit of a loose cannon. He had a fantastic game as captain. There were a couple of stinks, blokes thrown into hoardings, a lot of push and shove, jersey pulling, and Etzebeth stepped in and calmed them down. Yeah. He actually didn't get involved, and I thought, well, I've been proven wrong. If he can,
he's been playing that clip of RuggaMatrix over and over. I'm going to prove you wrong, Kimber.
But if he can do that, he's a very strong player. He's a very important figure for their pack, and if he can keep his head together, he'll be a good captain.
Yeah, Yankees also a little bit of an indifferent start, Benny, but he produced some fine displays of rugby though that helped the Springboks score. So I just hope they keep sticking with him because he's a great attacking player in the making.
Look, Yantis went pretty well. His kicking game wasn't too bad, and actually his passing game was good as well. What I've said about Yantis is I don't think he's quite top notch at international level, and I think when you get an All Black or Wallaby back row running at him, he's going to find it a very different game. But in this game, he did have a good game. He did go well, kicked well, missed an easy penalty early, but kicked well. Chased well, ran around the park well, and put a few blokes away.
Well, he's come up against the Pumas, and earlier this year, 3-test series against the French. So I'm saying I'm backing him in, and I threw him in my very thrown together fantasy league team. So
you did.
Go strong.
Another guy, and not to say the Argentinians don't have some good players. Creevy still.
No, they've got some good players.
I like Tucolet out the back at 15. Didn't get enough chances probably, but he looks kind of sharp every now and again. But the Box, Kolisi had a massive game.
Yeah, huge.
He's in my fantasy side. He's a guy that I really enjoy watching play, and I think he's growing. He's big and strong, but he plays wide, and he scored 2 tries. He had a very big game.
Question 2. I noticed it. I think it was on YouTube. I'm not quite sure. Can you come back to us if you were the person who put the comment? But made a comment about the. I saw it somewhere about the Argentinian side. They seem to be going backwards because they're in Super Rugby.
Yeah.
Did you? I don't know if you saw that, but what do you reckon about that as a comment?
Well, it seems a remarkable coincidence.
Yeah.
But what you thought might be good for them, the idea that maybe they'd get a core group of guys who get
'Cause
to
a
play
lot of them
together
played
for
in
a lot
Europe.
of the year. That's right. And they brought
Yeah.
them back with that idea, right?
Yeah.
If they could get a good 9 guys, I think, in that Jaguares team
Yeah.
who could play together and move along together, it hasn't happened that way. The Argentinians, since that have happened, have not been in as good nick at test level. They seem to lack a little discipline. They don't seem to be as pulled together as much as they have been in the past. But I know it does seem to be correlative to their time in Super. But I don't know.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting what the South Africans take out of the Australia-New Zealand contests and apply to the contests where they come to play Australia and New Zealand. What they do and target Australia. I think the big problem here is we just don't know what Australia's going to do when they play their next test match, because which one's going to turn up? 99% of their last games have all been terrible, and we've just seen one epic match from them. So we just don't know.
Yeah. Another point out of that game, the box scrum very, very much on top.
Well, there's one
of
thing
the
they're going to look
Argies,
forward
right?
to playing Australia.
Yeah, so the Wallaby scrum could be in trouble the way the box scrum, and it's Oosthuizen. I keep getting touched up by some of our Bok fans on YouTube for getting his name wrong. I think it's
So it
Oosthuizen.
should be.
At tight head for the box is going very well, looking very strong, and they really did push the Argies around. The Argies, the history of their scrum, they would have been very disappointed with that. And what really was in both games, you see that how important that scrum can be, how you can suck players in and keep them there. Bowden Barrett wrapping around the back of the scrum and scoring straight past Genia when Foley didn't track around with him in the Wallabies All Blacks game, just because that pressure in the scrum keeps those back rowers on. Happened also for the box. When that scrum is so powerful and on top, and the opposition scrum can't afford to stick their heads up the back rows and have a look around, they've got to keep pushing, gives you those opportunities around that. We saw that in both games. Danger there for the Wallabies in Perth, and I think one of the areas the All Blacks will destroy Argentina.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the thing is, I think the Australian back row was saying that they couldn't wait to get out of the back of the scrum, but that's almost an admission of capitulation, and they've got to be really careful. I mean, the Australian scrum was so bad that it was too difficult for the All Blacks to push them over, from any sort of distance from the try line. So if they concentrate on doing that for the next week or so, they're not going to be working on other areas. So there's lots of stuff, and kick-off receipt will be one of those things they have to work on, because that is a really vital part of the game. Conceding possession, the kick-off, can lead to all sorts of things, like losing the test match.
You might see Kepu start for the Wallabies too, I think.
Yeah, all right. Next, we've got to move on, mate. We're getting
Women's
out
World
of
Cup.
time.
I want to touch on the Women's World Cup.
Go for it.
I only watched the highlights all the way through, but like the highlights from that final, clearly New Zealand claimed it over England, but quality rugby. The hands, the power, the pace. Some tries, through the middle on both sides. Lydia Thompson for England scored this fantastic try where she fielded a chip kick, ran around Portia Woodman and gassed away. Just fantastic toe right down the sideline. I thought England were up 17-10 at halftime. Natua, the prop for the Black Ferns, scored 3 tries, a hat-trick, one before halftime and a couple after. I thought her third try was a knock-on though. She was tackled, she got up and released and picked the ball up again, but when she released, the ball went forward. So I thought the Black Ferns lucky to get away with that. But look, one thing I saw too, Brett Gosper, son of a former AOC, and he's a World Rugby executive, son of a former AOC executive in Australia. He tweeted, one of the reasons you may be enjoying the Women's World Cup was because the ball was in play and average extra 10 minutes per game compared to the men's. So really interesting to see that rugby played with the ball in play like that, and I thoroughly enjoyed all those highlights. They were great.
Yeah, and so I call Women's Rugby League as well, and there's a really strong trait in women's football where the players don't get caught up with all the nonsense that the men do, all the sort of aggro stuff, and just want to play.
Yep.
And so I'm not surprised by those figures in terms of ball in play. So I actually love watching women's footy. I just think it's awesome. And the All Blacks, I think someone posted they've never lost a final, the All Blacks, when they're in them, and the Black Ferns. Right. So, which doesn't surprise me.
I also saw Will Greenwood, the former England centre, he tweeted that neither the England men's team or England's women's team have ever beaten New Zealand in a World Cup, which is interesting.
Wow. So everyone knows how each other feels against the All Blacks. But yeah, well done. Great stuff. And, they have been forced to play in a really tight time period too, the women's game. So I'd like to see them get a bit more of a breather between matches. And but yeah, it's just tremendous, and well done to everyone who put it on too, because it looked great.
Great
it
to
really
see.
was.
And
Just exciting
quality.
stuff.
Quality.
Yeah, it was. It really was exciting stuff. So well done, New Zealand.
3 things
Next,
to cover quickly.
yep.
Club Rugby fantasy viewer comments. What do you want first, pal?
Oh, let's go to Club Rugby.
Club Rugby, Rats, Warringah Rats 30, North 25. As
Now, I
threatened,
heard you were lurking, getting signatures in dressing rooms and stuff.
I was not.
A stout of mine.
I was nowhere near the dressing rooms, but I tell you where I was.
Yeah.
I was on the field for the tunnels when they ran out.
Right.
Because I was there with my 7-year-old Dash, and he said, he saw the tunnel forming, all the teams get
Yeah.
up there, and he said, Dad, can we join the tunnel? So I went out there and
The
joined
world's
the tunnel
biggest
with him.
tunnel too.
It was a great tunnel. But just the atmosphere, unbelievable. I said I
About
sat there.
17,000 in North Sydney.
I
Oval.
sat there for 2 quiet minutes at the start of the Bledisloe the previous week thinking, where's the atmosphere? The place was rocking. 17,000 packed in. You couldn't find a seat anywhere. And the quality of rugby was great.
It's
but
the
also,
biggest crowd since Les Kiss was there.
it was a
Yeah.
bigger crowd than Wallabies Fiji.
Yeah,
So it was a bigger crowd than Wallabies Fiji a few weeks back or a couple of months back.
and more exciting.
And more exciting.
Yeah.
But also a seesawing game, 2 great storylines. Norths, who've got Simon Cron, who's going to the Waratahs as coach. He left the team for a little while this season, came back,
Yeah.
brought him home. But the Rats, such an emotional win. Sam Ward, his brother Lachlan passed away in June while playing for the Rats. They had a lot of emotion in their team. They held a picture up of him after the game. And a big, big win for Warringah at a great event.
That was great.
I loved it.
Great stuff. Good scenes. So if you're looking at Australian rugby from afar, the club game doesn't get a cent anymore from the RU. And they did it all on their own. They mounted telecasts on Channel 7 and went on the main channel. So it was live in New South Wales, and yet
Fantastic.
it was still a full
Love to see
house.
the numbers like that too.
Yeah, so fantastic. So well done to everyone in Clubland. And tomorrow night is the catch bowl, I think.
Yeah, we're going to go to the catch
that's
bowl
right.
medal.
Got a few things to do. I've got to go to 3 events tomorrow night. I'll be going all over the
Mate,
place.
You're just too popular.
All right.
Fantasy.
So well done, Club Rugby in Australia. Carrying the torch. Fantastic stuff. All right. Fantasy. Let's go to it again. Thanks to Rugby Pass.
Let's just reiterate. Number 1, baby.
Yeah, righto.
Number 1. Going to keep telling you, mate.
Yeah, right.
I've got to say it while I'm there, right? I'm not going to hang on to it.
It's rigged.
But as I said at the top of the show, a few players who I picked who I thought were going to have good tournaments are bringing the
Well,
points
your
home.
team's up there now.
I think that in this fantasy, it looks like the scoring is weighted a little too heavily to tries. So you've got to have guys who score tries. I made a mistake this week in that I thought the Wallabies would get touched up, so I moved out Alatoa, I moved out Hooper. I brought in Squire for Hooper, and Hooper had a cracking game and got a bunch of points. So I lost a few points there. I also took Landaho out because he got benched, so I put in Aaron Smith. But really, the big point scorers for me, Falau keeps scoring points, Ioane keeps scoring points, and Barrett, as my kicker and captain, has been just absolutely racking up the points for me. So I've managed to keep a bunch of those guys together who I think are doing well. I'm getting enough out of my front row with Creevy. So a guy I said was value in Creevy was cheapish, but is giving me enough to mean that I don't have to put a bloke in there who might be reaping the rewards a bit more elsewhere. But overall, I've now kicked about 10 points clear, I think, at the top of this league. And everybody, you've got to come and get me now because I'm looking to kick further clear next week.
All right.
Kimber's lazy runners, mate.
Yeah, don't worry. I've got Broncos battlers there, and they're battlers. I mean, when I did it, I had 2 million left over.
Yeah.
And I said I had to get out of. I had to jump in the car, so I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I had to work out how to get rid of guys that weren't even playing. But I've got a couple of fly halves there getting the points. So I just need other people scoring tries or whatever. So anyway, it's.
Can I quickly shout out to some viewer comments?
Let's do viewer comments of the week.
All right. On YouTube, Johan Troyer, Andrew Buchanan, Tony Wybrow talking about, I know that was on Facebook, sorry, talking about the Box game. It's called it a scrappy affair, and it was. The Box did enough to comfortably win it, but it wasn't a top-class game.
Yeah. Johan's
shout
been
out-
there since the start.
He has. Shout out to Tony Wybrow, Eamon Lyons, Putu Putapu. He said that was a benchmark, that game, that Bledisloe game. Eamon said stunning effort from Australia. David Weddy always gets stuck in. Said Genny was all over Aaron Smith, and I thought he was, mate.
Yeah.
And Foley's kicking was ball from both hand and tee. Another reason I say Foley's going to struggle. Grant Swartz said brilliant match. Over on YouTube, Leicester fan 180 tells me Fardy's doing really well over here now.
Great.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, thanks, mate.
Yeah, great.
Big shout out to Ron from Belfast who jumped on there too and said the team must love you guys after we gave him a touch up last week. Thanks, Ron.
If you see Les Kiss over there, say good day.
Another Irish supporter, actually, Shane Lally, said he thought the first 3 tries were lucky and New Zealand should have won by more, so independent voice there.
Yeah, they were lucky, but they
And,
took advantage of it, yeah.
And that's about it.
All right.
Lawrence Hooper, as I mentioned before, gave me that great Cheika watch.
All right, wow, there's plenty to cover there. Okay, mate, we're going to wind it up here. Thanks very much for all the comments. It went absolutely nuts. Last week's show was approaching like 30,000.
30,000 plus we had watched last week's show, so thank you.
So thanks for tuning in there. Don't forget what you need to do.
Share it, like it, comment it. We really do appreciate it when you put our show out into other groups that you're a part of, guys. It makes a big difference. If you're still there now, give us a thumbs up and don't forget your comments. They make us think.
Yeah, look, if we haven't got back to you in the comments, we are reading them all. We're getting to them. So,
Mate, last week was crazy. I couldn't get to them, but
no,
I will.
And there's some great comments there on YouTube as well. And we're going to get to everyone eventually, but it is pretty manic at the moment. All right, Ben, thanks for coming in. It was a wonderful game on the weekend. You know, we like to see Australia play well, but we just see them. We've got to see them back it up, and they need to check the attitude.
They do, and look, I want to say again, congratulations to both teams. Thank you to the Wallabies for finding your ticker and turning up, and keep it up. Let's see more good games.
And I've got to say, give South Africa a rap. Keep it up, because we said that they're on the rise, and they continue to do the job.
It's going to be a massive game in Perth. We'll have a show next week. We'll get into it.
Yeah, that's going to be huge, and it's just going to be massive to see what the reaction from the fans is going to be in Perth as well.
I'm really looking forward to that. I've been enjoying the box play, and the Wallabies have turned up, so hopefully we'll get a cracker.
All right, fantastic. Thanks for coming in, mate. There
Cheers,
he is,
buddy.
Ben Kimber. All right, thanks for joining us on RuggaMatrix International. We'll be back next week. Don't forget to jump onto Rugby Pass and try your fantasy team. You know, you can join me and just basically throw
Come
stuff
and get
at the
me,
dartboard.
baby.
But Benny's just having a delight there at number 1.